So why is whole life practice important? Well, I can say from my own personal experience that when I was focused on awakening, both the gradual and the imminent path of awakening, as rich and as wondrous as the insights that I was able to have understanding or access to, I could see that there were parts of my life around healing and around maturation that were not automatically being supported to good result. And so I needed to develop parallel practices. None of them were contradiction to the path of awakening. None of them were in opposition to the Noble Eightfold Path, but they were not specifically described or contained within the Noble Eightfold Path as a way of focusing my attention to bring about a certain kind of skills and generate the kind of results that resulted in the healing that I was needing. So for myself, I could see that the path of healing was an important parallel practice to take up, and that supported my own deepening in awakening. But I can also see, both in myself as well as in some of my brothers and sisters and in other friends in the Dhamma around, that the path of awakening by itself doesn't automatically translate into both seeing where we are in the path of maturation or helping us to get to a higher, more inclusive, more having more ability to meet our needs without it being at somebody else's expense, or to understand and advocate for the diverse people's needs that are different from my own. And so when we look at some of the issues that we're facing in communities around the country and around the world, where there are a lot of conversations around inclusivity and diversity, then we can see that the path of awakening by itself may not be the best match for dealing with issues that are really delineated in the path of maturation. So when some of our hunger in our communities is to find ways of creating spiritual community and developing a path of practice that supports many more of us having access to the Dhamma in ways where they too feel safe, where they too feel they belong, where they too feel empowered that their truth, their own experience has a validity, where they too see there is a rational cognitive coherence between the teachings and the structure that is being implemented to support them. So when we see this, when we see that we have work to do in our communities around inclusivity, then the path of maturation, understanding it, cultivating it, developing it, and actually speaking about it as a parallel path may help us better get our needs met. Because in situations where I have been, where the path of maturation has not been spoken about, has not been considered a valid and important part of the path, then the only thing that we have as a resource is to go back to the tools that are available to us in the gradual path and the imminent path, and those paths are not the most conducive for maturation. And maturation is the place where these needs for inclusivity are able to be addressed. Now, when we look at some of the things that are going on in the world right now, when we see the magnitude of the issues of what we're navigating, when we see the devastation, the desolation of people who have been living with oppression for far too long and are struggling to find just the simple, basic safety that comes with being allowed to be in a place and not fear for one's life, we can see that in terms of engagement in the world, there are many, 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 many areas that are asking for attention. There are areas around the devastation of climate change, around war, around poverty, around the inequity. There are issues around race, around who is welcome and who's not welcome. So all of the many diverse groups that are targeted presently are needing allies and support, and people who are interested not only to be allies and support for them, but also people who are willing to look at the structures that are supporting the systems that are targeting them in the first place. So in terms of the world right now, probably more than ever before, the world is crying for people to step up and engage in direct action that supports change in a way where more diverse people are able to get their needs met, where we are moving towards a world which is sustainable rather than on a path of self-destruction. And I can see that when we look in the path of engagement, that unless we have our anchor in awakening, then it is all too easy to get completely burnt out by the enormity of the task at hand and feel overwhelmed by the amount of sorrow that's in front of us. I mean, I don't know that any of us can avoid feeling overwhelmed by the amount of suffering that is around us, but I do know that the more that we are anchored in the path of awakening, the more that we have a perspective that holds us through the thick and the thin of what it is that we need to navigate. But since many of the global issues that we are navigating have to do with understanding and advocating for diverse people's needs, and because this is a feature of maturation rather than the direct consequence of awakening, then our engagement will be hugely supported the more mature we are ourselves. And it is also true that even though it is important to step up to the plate, when we step up to the plate as wounded healers ourselves, then our capacity is limited. And so the more we are able to clear the traumas out of our own system, to move towards states of mental health and well-being, to live in a way where we are sober, to have strong and resolved methods of self-care, then our capacity to stay engaged is hugely supported. So in our life right now, more than any other time, I think, in the world, whole life practice is being called for to generate the kind of spiritual warrior that has oneself and the world in mind, to be integrated and grounded and with resource oneself and able to bring that into the world.